Before we jump into today's episode, I'm so excited to be able to tell you that my debut book, Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity, will be published on the 19th of November, with the Kindle edition available on the 18th for 99p for one day only, so set an alert in your diary. Optimal You is a groundbreaking guide uncovering the 8 pillars of health for supercharged energy and strengthened immunity to optimize your health and extend your health span. Delve into evidence-based strategies to optimize nutrition, balance your lifestyle, reduce toxin exposure, and address root causes of health imbalances. There's a 14-step anti-inflammatory nutrition blueprint included in the book to supercharge your mitochondria and fortify your immune system. Plus, my 4 lifestyle S's, sleep, stress, strength, and social, that form the foundation of optimal well-being. The book will help you to empower yourself with practical tools and insights to embark on a transformative journey towards the optimal version of you. You can pre-order your copy or read what people are saying about the book at optimalyoubook.com. Now let's head to today's episode. Welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritionist, and author. In this podcast, we delve into the world of energy and immune health and wellness with positivity, from optimal health and energy to stress and burnout, right through to immune conditions such as thyroid and autoimmune disease. We deep dive into functional medicine, nutritional medicine, and lifestyle medicine, as well as the personal stories of our amazing guests, from Olympians to famous faces and guest experts from all different parts of the health and wellness world. It's time to stop letting your health hold you back and become the optimal version of you. Don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health, that's GOODE, or visit the website nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more. Today we welcome Dr. Dana Gibbs to the Good Health Podcast. Dana is an educator, a hormone expert, and a board-certified ENT and allergist. Dr. Gibbs attended medical school in San Antonio in Texas and trained in otolaryngology at the University of Kansas. Her experience of ill health during her teens all the way to her late 30s led to profound changes in the way she practices medicine. After spending those years unrecognized, dismissed, and told that it was all in her head, she found mentors in the integrative medicine world that helped her find the answers and solutions to her problems. These answers now inform her practice and educational efforts. She recently retired from her ENT practice and opened Consultants in Metabolism, a direct care practice for thyroid, metabolic, and hormone management for women and men. The practice is located in North Texas and offers live and virtual visits. In today's episode, we're jumping into thyroid health, hormone health, why Dr. Dana finds that using an integrative approach works much better for her patients, and how you can help to regain your energy. Let's jump straight into the conversation. Okay, so Dana, welcome to the Good Health Podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be great.
So I'd really love to start with your story and talking about, we were just having a chat before we started recording this, and we were sort of saying that a lot of people reach out to me and they sort of think they've maybe been down that road of having undiagnosed thyroid or whatever condition it might be, and they've been a long time. And I think people always assume that that's something that's not going to happen to doctors.
Right.
And yet it does. And I think that's what's really interesting for people, I think, around your story. Let's go sort of right back. What originally sort of led you into medicine? Was that something that you always wanted to do? Was it sort of a lifelong goal, or was that something you came to later?
Yeah, I mean, the big question is, what is an ENT doctor doing treating hormones? So, I get that a lot. But yeah, let's go all the way back. So, I started reading medical history books, and when I was 9, 10 years old, with the early history of medicine. And I just decided that I was going to be like Harvey Cushing and be a brain surgeon, back when I was about, 10 or 11 years old. But it was interesting because as I got older and got towards that time where you make the decision, okay, I'm going to go and get a medical degree or whatever, I was already starting to be tired.
Okay.
When it came time to declare, your major for college, when you're ready to go off to college, I had already been sick I missed like half of my senior year in high school because of being ill.
Yeah.
And I was tired. I was really feeling like there's no way I can do what I've heard that it takes to do medical school.
Yeah.
So I chose something else. I chose an engineering field. And, that lasted a little while until I realized that I really didn't like all that math nearly as much as I liked the other kinds of science. And so it's like, okay, I'll be a research scientist. I can do that from 9 to 5. And I started off in my post-university job as a research scientist, and all around me were doctors. And guess who was having all the fun in the research lab? It was the doctors. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I see the handwriting. I see it on the wall. I know what I need to do. And so I went ahead and took the entrance exams for medical school. And I got in and I started. I was still tired.
Were you getting any support at that stage?
I had been to the health clinic. I'd been to a routine physical. They said, oh, you're fine. Everything's fine. When I got to medical school, same thing. Medical school is brutal. Time commitment wise, intensity of the experience wise. And I got halfway through medical school. We started on the wards, and I would get faint and have to take a knee, kneel down in the hallway outside a patient's room. I would get chided. I would get, lambasted by the more senior people. That's unprofessional, blah, blah, blah. Well, so is passing out. And I'm fixing to pass out. So I went back to the health clinic and I said, hey, all this is going on. I'm feeling extremely tired. That wasn't the only symptom. I was cold all the time. I was losing weight, not gaining weight. I was losing weight because I had no appetite. There was just this laundry list of symptoms, but the exhaustion was pretty extreme. And I looked around myself and everybody else is tired, but it did not occur to me at the time that what I saw was pathologically tired. And so I went back to the health clinic and they were like, oh yeah, you're fine. Here, take these antidepressants.
Right.
Anybody else heard that story before, right? Okay. And at this time, I'm around doctors every single day. But the culture is such that you don't talk about your personal, how you feel. You're not allowed to be tired. You're not allowed to be weak. You could be throwing up and you better be back on the wards in, 15 minutes. I mean, I can remember sitting behind the nurse's station taking a breathing treatment so that I could then continue my work on the ward, just stupid stuff like that. And it just went on. And when it came time to choose what kind of a doctor I was going to be, I looked at, the neurosurgery and I looked at the heart surgery, and I ended up choosing ear, nose, and throat because it was interesting surgery, but it was mostly kids and snotty noses and tonsils and stuff that goes home from the hospital and doesn't keep you up all night. So, I mean, there was a lot of that in the deal, but for the most part, the senior attendings were not spending their nights in the hospital the way the neurosurgeons were, the way the general surgeons were. And so I was like, okay, I get to do surgery, but I don't have to have my entire life be this culture of sacrifice.
And it felt more doable, I suppose.
Right. So it looked more accessible to me, and it was also really interesting. And so that's what I chose. I had to do a year of general surgery. Almost killed me. Oh my God. And once again, I went back to the health clinic and I'm like, hey, really, really something's wrong. I'm so cold when I go home to go to bed at night that I literally can't fall asleep. I wake up drenched in sweat. Do you think I might have cancer? In med school, I was taught that people with low thyroid were overweight, and I never was.
And that's one of those real myths, isn't it, around it, is that, if you look at somebody and they're not overweight, can't be. You can be that hypothyroid and, like you said, be losing weight.
Right. It never occurred to me. It never occurred to my doctors. My TSH was always in that normal range. Yeah. I clawed and scratched my way through my residency by sheer willpower and finished. I did not distinguish myself, but I made it through. By this time, I had been feeling that way for 15, 16 years? I don't know, since my mid-teen years. And I finished my training. I went and started into private practice. I was employed for a couple years. I ended up parting ways with that one person and starting my own practice. And, things had been going a little bit better for a while. I had gone from drinking a whole pot of coffee every day to stay awake to, maybe 2 cups of coffee every day to stay awake. And then giving up caffeine altogether because I really still couldn't sleep. I mean, sleep disruption is another huge issue.
Despite being so tired.
Right. Despite being so tired, you're just sleeping, you're laying there awake at 3 a.m. going la, 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 in your head. And so I gave up caffeine altogether. It's like, okay, this has got to go. And it helped, yes, some, but I still wasn't ever a great sleeper. And this is a weird side thing. So in the ENT world, and this is probably stuff that your audience doesn't know, a big part of what ear, nose, and throat doctors do is allergy. It's kind of like a subspecialty within ENT is allergy and food allergy. I decided very quickly that my patients weren't getting well without me learning how to do this allergy stuff. I had managed to kind of skive off learning it through my residency. And so then I went back and had to pay big bucks to go to conferences and learn how to do all this allergy stuff. And so I was at a conference, and it was a conference I'd been to before. And I was there and I'd heard this one lecture and I was like, oh my gosh, this one, I don't need to hear it again. And so I went into one of the secondary lectures, and the guy was talking about thyroid. And I was like, thyroid, okay, whatever. But the more he got into this lecture and he started this laundry list of the symptoms of low thyroid, by the time he finished with that list, I mean, I had to pick my jaw up off the floor. I was like, oh my God, he just described me in every detail. I have low thyroid. I have hypothyroidism. And it had never occurred to me before that minute. So I went home and I asked my personal doc, I said, I know you have seen my labs and you know that my TSH is normal, but please, 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 I want to try this, And so I started on Armour Thyroid at that point. And it was like a miracle. Holy cow, this is what normal people feel like? What? I didn't know.
Yeah. Especially when you had it from that age, right? From being like mid, because for me, my journey sort of started, my health journey started around like 16 as well. And much like you, so I went to university doing neuroscience, and I sort of got into, by the time I was in second year, I was really struggling. And much like you, I was dizzy, I was feeling faint, I was sort of coming out of lectures thinking I'm going to pass out. And it was hard, and I struggled, and I made the decision not to carry on and go to med school, even though that was, like you, what I'd wanted to do from being a child.
Yeah.
I didn't see a way through of getting through, junior doctor kind of work and doing those hours, working nights. And it was just I wasn't going to be able to do it at that time. So I had that sort of similar story. And I think when you've had something from that age, particularly from that sort of mid-teens, particularly where you're going into that era, if you like, of all the exams and all the studying, and you're coming up, I mean, it's slightly different with sort of American schooling, but here it's GCSEs, it's A levels, it's university. So, we have this long period.
It's a slog.
So it is. And we're so examined over that time. And I think you hit that era and you sort of think, well, I'm tired because I'm working hard and I'm doing all these exams. I'm trying to get into uni, and I'm, there's all these things going on that there's a lot that you can kind of put down to those things. In much the same way that as we get older, we put things down to age that we shouldn't put down to age.
Yes.
But in much the same, if you've had those health things that have started as you're starting in that sort of period of examination and stuff like that, it's very easy to put it down to stress or to put it down to being tired from doing all of that. And much like you said, you just can't, you kind of don't realize how other people are feeling. You don't realize how bad you've almost been feeling.
That's exactly right. And I mean, I think emotionally, I was scarred from that because I went through life thinking, oh, well, I'm just a lazy, no good, not good enough, so-and-so, whatever, Yeah, it's that lecture. That was a funny time for me because I didn't care at the time that the guy who was teaching the lecture didn't know why you could have normal TSH and still have hypothyroidism. All he knew was he gave his patients this medicine and they got better.
So he was a doctor, conventional medicine doctor.
He was a I wouldn't, he was never a conventional human being, but he was a medical doctor, family medicine doctor. He had set up a wellness clinic and was treating allergies, and he was treating menopause, and he was treating adrenal fatigue. He called it adrenal fatigue. I think in the US, really that term is considered not legitimate by most physicians. And he was just shooting from the hip. He was a cowboy. I mean, he lived in Houston, every sense of the word. He was a cowboy, and he was just doing whatever he wanted. He was outside of insurance. he was charging people enormous sums of money to come to his clinic and be treated like kings and queens and fixed. But he didn't know why it worked. And at the time, I didn't care because I felt so much better.
Yeah.
But I had to eventually figure it out because I was like, okay, I went back to my clinic and I'm still seeing sinus and people with actual thyroid nodules, which is, something that ENT doctors take care of all the time because it's in your throat, ear, nose, throat, and allergies and all the things. I would see that list of symptoms in my head.
I was going to say, did it change how you practice?
It changed how I practice. Well, it changed how I saw the patients at first.
Yeah.
But in my doctor do no harm brain, I couldn't bring myself to cowboy up like this other guy and just randomly give people thyroid stuff. I have to know why this works. Looking and looking. I finally found a mentor that taught me a system that helps me know, okay, is this problem that you're having related to your thyroid or not? Definitively from the labs that I can order. And they're not the same standard labs that everybody orders, of course. And once I felt a little more comfortable with what I was doing, I started doing it. I started saying, okay, Miss Jones, you need sinus surgery, but I see these other symptoms in you. Can we try you on some thyroid medicine? And she would say, well, sure. Yeah, if you think it'll help me feel better. And 6 months later, she'd come back and I'd be like, when are we going to do your sinus surgery? And she's, oh, I don't need that. I'm all fine. I just need more of those thyroid pills. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And that was when I knew I was onto something, and the first couple of times when people who had had 4 miscarriages in a row had a baby because I changed their thyroid medicine, it was just, okay, my mind is blown. And I think this is the story of a lot of physicians who go the unconventional route, is that something personal has to happen to them before it breaks them free from this idea of, oh, that person, she's just a hypochondriac, blah, blah, blah.
I think the same can be said for functional medicine though as well, because I think particularly because maybe functional medicine is not as well known as your normal medical standards medicine, I think in order to find it and retrain in it, I think a lot of people have been on their own health journey, and that's how I found it. I found it because that's what helped me. I was then feeling better and I was like, this is it. This is what I now want to do. I want to retrain in this to help other people because I'd always wanted to help people with the health. That was always the original goal. It was what I'd wanted to do from being a child. And then when I found this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to go back to. And I think even from coming at it from a functional perspective, certainly at the moment, because it's not as well known as, as conventional medicine, I think a lot of us have our own story. In fact, I think on the podcast with the experts that we've had on that come from either from nutrition, functional medicine, or doctors from medicine, I think there's only been one that hadn't had a personal health story behind why they ended up doing what they do.
I think that, the sustained passion for what you do, it has to be personal, or you just don't have enough of a why. I think that's a big part of it.
How often do you see undiagnosed or undertreated sort of hypothyroidism? How often do you see somebody coming in with something that they think is something else, and you actually sit down and you say, hold on a minute, let's look at thyroid?
Nowadays, not as much, because if you looked on my website, then you know that that's what I say I do. I do thyroid, this and that. And so people are coming to me, they're saying, I talked my doctor into doing the antibody tests. I have Hashimoto's antibodies. I feel like shit, but my other labs are fine. What do I do? Those are the people that walk in my door these days. But before, when I was seeing just ENT patients, so say allergy patients, for example. So I would get an allergy patient and I would do their allergy tests. If their allergy tests came back negative, but they were sick, I was, you have thyroid. Until I prove it to myself that everything is completely fine, you have thyroid problems. The deeper you look, the more you find, and it's just like, wow. So yeah, in allergy patients, at least 30%. And so there's an overlap there.
Yeah.
And I see that the other way around. I see that patients come in and they're like, yeah, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease and I went on this diet and I feel better if I don't eat XYZ. And I'm like, yeah, because you have allergies. You have food allergies. I'm a little bit unique in that I have the training now in both because I did the allergy treatment for so many years. And so when people say, oh, everybody who has Hashimoto's has to go on this particular diet. No, because not everybody is allergic to all that stuff you just took away from them. And you're just adding to their stress by making them not eat this and this and this and this and this.
And damaging the gut health as well. We know that, the more diverse the diet, the healthier the gut. And I find that a lot. A lot of people come to me and they're on such a restrictive diet. They've gone down that road of just, they've read that they need to cut out, X, Y, Z, and then they read something else and they need to cut out more things and they just keep cutting foods out. By the time they get to me, they're really on very, very restrictive diets.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to work on the thyroid. We've got to protect your health as a whole as well.
Yeah.
We've got to protect your whole body and you need the nutrients from food. It's got to be personalized. I'm a huge advocate of it has to be personalized. There is no thyroid diet that works for every single person.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that's something that has bothered me for a long time is, there's book after book about you have to go on this diet. And if you're not gluten-free, you're doing something wrong. And I'm not sure I agree with
Yeah, I think everybody's different. And even amongst thyroid, Hashimoto's is different to if you're just hypothyroid, or not just hypothyroid, but hypothyroid without the antibody, without antibodies.
Yes.
Even that makes a difference. There's so many different factors at play. And like you've said, all the other things that I know you've touched on a couple of those other things as well that are very heavily interlinked, such as the fertility around that sort of pregnancy phase of our lives.
Yes.
That's menopause phase of lives, stress and adrenals,
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on that.
Yeah. But they're so interlinked, and that changes what you need to do to support the person as well. And everybody's picture will look a bit different. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of hormone aspect. I know that you sort of do a lot of work around that sort of hormones, and we've talked a little bit, we've touched on that weight loss, weight gain, and where sort of a lot of doctors sort of say, if they're not sort of overweight, it won't be hypothyroid and all of this, but it can go either way. You can be losing weight or you can be gaining weight. You may not have weight issues that as well. There is also that scenario. But from a hormone point of view as well, the hormone aspect that is very interlinked with thyroid can also play a role in a lot of these symptoms like fatigue, weight loss. And for example, like with weight, Hashimoto's can slow your metabolism down, but menopause can also do things like increase how you store fat and, all things like this. So there's lots of aspects around a lot of these different symptoms, fatigue as well. That's going to fluctuate heavily with what the sex hormones are doing if we're in different phases of our cycle as women particularly. But that hormone picture is hugely interlinked with thyroid.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I'll tell you, the theory that I have about that is that insulin resistance is so strongly overlapping with hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is just because of how your body perceives that. It's almost like it's wrapped up in the stress response as well. So it's how your body perceives what is happening to you, and it goes into survival mode. And insulin resistance is a survival tactic. People don't realize that. It's what helped our ancestors survive the Irish potato famine, for example. Whatever famine, whatever war, whatever failed crop where food was really, really scarce. And so when your body perceives a threat to survival, it turns on that insulin resistance, and insulin resistance makes you hold on to your fat. It makes your blood sugars rise so that you can store more, so that you can survive the winter when there is no food. We were talking about there's no one diet for everybody with Hashimoto's, but the truth of the matter is there kind of is one diet, and it's basically a Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
Because so much of hypothyroidism, and not just Hashimoto's, but a lot of different hypothyroidism, is wrapped up with insulin resistance. And the diet that works best for that, and it's really becoming now actually more accepted, is low starch, no sugar, no sweeteners at all, and a diverse phytonutrient, high vegetable, high fiber. I'm not going to say plant-based because I really do think meat has, especially if it's the right kind of meat, has a role in nutrients.
High plant intake
High plant intake, yes, because you need all the diverse vitamins, minerals, all the things. But we don't realize that that's what's happening when we go and we eat that Mediterranean diet and we cut out the gluten and the other processed grains. And basically what we're doing is we're lowering the glycemic index of what we take in. And it helps.
Yeah.
Because insulin resistance is one of the defects that you get turned on when you're in survival mode.
Yeah. I don't think I've got one patient in clinic that is a thyroid patient that I'm not working on blood sugar with. And that might be that they've got blood sugar issues, or it may be from a point of view of working to make sure they don't get them, because there's a chance it's a lot more likely.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's one where we've not at some point worked on blood sugar and making sure that side of things is balanced. And I get a lot of people that sort of say to me, particularly around that fertility side of things, is thyroid, is Hashimoto's, is it going to have a really big impact on fertility? Will I be able to get pregnant, and all of this? And it all really does come down to balance of hormones. All of this, we're talking the sex hormones, the thyroid hormones, we're talking the adrenal hormones, we're talking all the insulin, all the blood sugar stuff. It's all hormones. It's all hormones that regulates all of that stuff. So it's taking that full body hormone picture to sort of manage everything, and it is all that sort of endocrine system.
Yeah, it's funny because I was looking at, okay, why don't endocrinologists in the US, why don't they do this? And part of it has to do with the academic institutions and basically that they're set in concrete and they have trouble moving towards new ideas. And part of it is just that they're so overwhelmed with all the diabetes that they don't have time to learn this new out there stuff, which is a shame because they really ought to be the doctors who are right on this.
Yeah, because our thyroid gland has got receptors on for estrogen.
Yes, it does. Well, everything in your body has a receptor for estrogen. Yeah. It's amazing.
You just can't get more connected, can you? It's like, you do think that it would come down to sort of endocrinologists, but it's not necessarily always the case.
No, it's almost never the case, actually, as far as what I can determine. I have one acquaintance who has thyroid disease, whose endocrinologist actually gives her menopausal hormones as well. And I'm like, she does what? Wow, she's a unicorn. I want to interview her. But so it's so weird to me that that's the way it is. But it really seems to be the case.
Yeah. You have quite a lot around things like PCOS and like some of those other hormone-related autoimmune conditions.
Yes. Well, so PCOS is insulin resistance. Once again, the way you take care of it is by controlling your diet. And then there are some herbs that I like to help PCOS because PCOS involves some conversion to neurochemicals, the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is what makes you grow hair on your chin if you're a female, and some other stuff. And so that enzyme that does that, it's 5-alpha reductase, excuse me. So 5-alpha reductase, has two functions. And one of them is that it takes progesterone, which somebody with PCOS doesn't have enough of, and it makes it into something called allopregnanolone, which is a neurochemical that causes, guess what? Migraines, amongst other things, PMS. And then 5-alpha reductase also takes the testosterone, which your ovaries make too much of in PCOS, and makes it into dihydrotestosterone, which basically masculinizes the person, whoever it might be, with the hair loss and the acne and the chin hair and all the things. So there's an herb that you can use that will block that enzyme. So it can be really helpful both for your PMS migraine sufferers, but also for people with PCOS. But really the answer that has been presented to me, because I didn't come up with it, my mentor did, is that you really do have to control the diet in PCOS. It's just, there's no substitute for, you got to get the carbs out of the diet so that you stop making so much insulin, because the higher your insulin is, the higher your cortisol is, it becomes a feedback loop that just makes it worse and worse and worse. And infertility, boom.
Yeah. So what's your approach if somebody comes in and maybe they have been down this road of undiagnosed, don't know what's going on, but they're experiencing lots of these sort of symptoms? What's your approach with people when they first walk through the door?
When they first walk through the door, we start with a history. And I'm not talking just the last 2 years. I want to know what their in utero life, I want to know whether their parents fought while they were pregnant with them. I want to know what their childhood was like. Were they the teacher's pet? Did they undergo any trauma? What has their life been like up to this moment? And then I go into the family history. And of course, I'm looking for diabetes. I'm looking for other people who have had thyroid issues. I'm looking for the GYN history and the stress history. I'm really looking a lot at their history of what kind of stressors, because it's funny because there's so much discounting of stress. And people are like, oh, well, it was just stress. I'm like, it was stress.
It's never just stress.
It's never just stress. Stress is cortisol. Cortisol, when it is too high, is harmful to your body. Cortisol is, it's the survival hormone. And the problem with that is that it turns off so many other systems in our bodies. It turns off reproduction. It turns off digestion. It turns off the ability to burn fat for exercise, with exercise.
What we call like that cortisol steal as well, don't we? Where it's like it gets prioritized because it's that survival mechanism. It gets prioritized over creating the other hormones, the sex hormones, whatever it might be.
Right.
Even thyroid hormones, it will get prioritized over it because of that inherent need for survival as the body sees it.
Exactly. Not only does it prioritize, it turns off your thyroid. It turns the dial down. It says high cortisol. Okay, let's turn TSH off so that you make less thyroid hormone, because those fat stores are precious. We got to save them. So I look for that trauma. And the first thing I do, because when you go in to change somebody's thyroid hormones, if you haven't supported their adrenals, they might not tolerate the change in the thyroid hormones. And I see that all the time. People coming back and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so weak, I can't get out of bed, or this or that. And I'm like, yeah, we jumped to the thyroid a little too soon. We should support the adrenals first. And so I always go there first. And then the next one you head to is the thyroid. After you've got the adrenals supported, you go to thyroid. And I'm very specifically looking for the balance between total T3 and reverse T3. The reason I picked total T3 over free T3, and I do look at free T3, but total T3 is the free and bound thyroid hormone, the active thyroid hormone. Reverse T3, it's such a small amount of the total amount of thyroid hormone that you have that you can't measure free reverse T3. Because the binding coefficients, and I'm getting too sciencey for your audience, I'm sorry about that. The binding coefficients are almost the same for T3 and for reverse T3. So you can compare them with one another. So you take the T3, you divide the reverse T3, you get a ratio. And you can do that whether you're using the British units, the molar units, or if you're using the microliters. You can do that calculation the same, and you get a ratio. And if that ratio is 12-1, that's spot on. That's where it's supposed to be. If you get a lower number, which almost all the patients that come to me have a lower number, then that's where we focus. And I focus on this balance of T3 to reverse T3 and fiddle with their thyroid hormone until we get that right and get the TSH in the normal range, the T3, the T4 free numbers in the normal range. And once we've got all that, then we can go on and move towards the sex steroid hormones and go, okay, now we can balance them. And unfortunately, when you balance one, then you got to rebalance the other because the binding proteins influence one another. And so, it's this complex dance and symphony. So, sometimes there are patients that come in and their antibody tests are negative and their symptoms all match hypothyroidism. And why do I have this? Well, the truth of the matter is that there is a genetic SNP, a genetic variant of one of the enzymes that converts T4 to T3. And that enzyme is called 5' deiodinase number 2. If you have this genetic variant, then your enzyme is only maybe a third as efficient as somebody's who does not have this same genetic variant. And if you have 2 copies of that, then you're really, really not going to be making T3, which is the active thyroid hormone. And you're going to be making a lot of reverse T3, which is the blocker of T3, which is going to make you feel exactly as if you have hypothyroidism, even though all your labs are technically in the normal range. And this SNP, they have done research and found that SNP in as many as 12% of people of British descent. And I was just shocked because I think that's probably what I have. I never had positive Hashimoto's antibodies, but I didn't start looking for them until 20 years after I'd been sick. So maybe my thyroid was just half dead by then anyway. I don't know. But this genetic SNP, there's not a test, a commercially available test for it, but it explained so much to me. And it's also pretty strongly interlinked with the insulin resistance thing. So it was a fascinating little factoid that I came across, and I was like, okay, well, this explains a lot. And overlaying it all is, do they have insulin resistance or don't they? And almost everybody does these days. But I'll tell you, if your thyroid is messed up, if that ratio is 3 or 4, you don't have the energy to cook something healthy.
Yeah.
You're not sleeping well enough to have the energy to do any exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you have to start somewhere. If you start, saying, oh, well, you need to eat healthier, what happens is a lot of patients just give up because they literally don't have the energy to go there. And so you got to give them a win. And that's why we start with the cortisol and then we move on to the thyroid. So yes, there's a protocol, but the protocol is customized for everybody because we see the results and then we adjust, and we see the results of the next step and then we adjust, and so on and so on.
And that is in my opinion, that is the only way that it works for everyone, is if you are personalizing it. There are these general themes that go through, like you're saying, like the insulin resistance and all the sort of those intricate balance of hormones. And it is a balance because most hormones are sort of very sensitive. We need them within quite a tight range to maintain that balance. We know we need to look at all of those things, but everybody will be a bit different because that patient history, that story of the person will be different for everybody. And that's where taking the full history of going right back is, and I've talked about this so many times on the podcast, of that, the importance of taking a full history all the way back and finding out what's going on and how things can be linked from something that happened such a long time ago, which I think is fascinating. But it is really important because everybody's story is different. Everybody's journey through life will have been different. Everybody will have come up against different things and different stressors. But it's very rare, I think, that you find somebody who really hasn't come up against a stressor at some point.
It is true. It is true. And here's another thing, is that the adrenal support nutrition that I recommend for most people is something that we theoretically should be able to get from our food. Our ancestors ate animals, and they ate all of the animal, including their adrenal glands. And so indirectly, they absorbed, those nutrients from the animals that they ate. We don't get that. I mean, most people don't even eat sausage anymore. Mm-hmm. The adrenal support supplements, they're mostly vitamins, but they're super, super important and crucial. And we don't get that from our food. And, much as I would like to say, okay, go out and eat red peppers and blueberries and this and that, and you'll get all the nutrients you need, it's just not practical in today's world.
And the quality of our food has changed so significantly as well. And
that's exactly right.
It's a whole other topic, but the soil quality of the food and the nutrients that the food gets to uptake, and all of this is my book that's coming out in November. I've got to the end of it, and I was like, there's got to be a chapter in this on quality of our food, because it's such a big overriding factor. I'm writing all this stuff about, these are the nutrients you need, these are the vitamins you need, these are the minerals you need for all these different things. And I sort of got to the end of the book and I was like, this is great, but people need to understand that quality of food is not there in the way that it was. And
correct.
What do we do about that? Because the soil health and the processes that our food goes through these days is so detrimental to our health, and people don't piece it together a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, it's really a problem. And, much as I hate to hand somebody a list and say, here, you need to take these 7 supplements, sometimes you have to do it.
Yeah. So if there's people out there and they're listening to this and they want to reach out and get in touch with you, they've got more questions for you, or they want to come and see you in your clinic, just tell us a little bit about your clinic and how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. So right now, my clinic is almost all virtual. I have an office in the Dallas area of Texas. I have medical licenses in Texas and in Iowa, so I can be your physician if you're in either of those states. For anyone else, I can be an advisor. I can take the labs that you have and I can work with your physician and help you straighten stuff out if you've got somebody who is open-minded and interested in helping you feel better, not just, following guidelines. And my website is danagibbsmd.com, www.danagibbsmd.com. I actually have a supplements guide that I just put out, and it's the same website /guide. Now, if there are doctors that are listening and they're like, I want to know what you know, I have a course, I have lectures that I have put online. I'm happy to get those to you if you're interested. You can email me. It's drgibbs@danagibbsmd.com. And I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook, so you can find me there as well.
Brilliant. That's great. We'll link all of those things below the show notes from your email and Instagram and Facebook, website, all of those things, and the sub guide as well. We'll link everything below the show notes so people can just get really quick access to that.
Oh, I just started a podcast. Can't believe I forgot. Oh my gosh. So yeah, my new podcast is called Beyond the Thyroid, and it's really going to be in and related to all hormonal aspects of being a human on this planet. So excited about that. We're starting with thyroid, but then we'll move on from there.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, we'll drop the link to that as well below. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time. And it's been really interesting to have a chat with you.
All right. No, I've enjoyed it very much. And thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone you think it may benefit, and help us to spread the word on all things health and wellness by rating, liking, or subscribing to the podcast. If you want more, you can listen to more episodes on your favourite podcast app, or sign up to my newsletter for my favourite tips, tricks, health advice, brands, recipes, and more at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter. Have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Good Health Podcast.